Hello, Stone. Thank you for being here today in the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited. I've been following along on your newly launched series and excited to be invited.
Thank you. Could you like us? I mean, how did you end up collecting digital art?
Well, I have this a little bit of a roundabout journey, which is that before I was into NFTs, I was actually into AI art. And I was at Google and I was working with Google Arts and Culture, and I was developing programs like Museum of Developer Art there, and really just interested in this either artists who were coders or programmers themselves, or artists that were willing to be paired with a programmer, a coder, or researcher. And so, I was kind of a part of that class of 2016, 17, like the Memo Atkins of the world, Sugwen Chong, Rafiq, Holly, Matt. And so I just was at Google and just thought, wow, this is such an interesting space. But that brought me to NFTs because the question was then, how do I collect this? What is the collecting strategy for works like this? And the rise of NFTs came after that. So, long answer, kind
So,
of
so
roundabout.
you worked at Google before all of this? And
Yeah, before all of it.
what were you doing at Google?
Yeah, I was on a team that was called Events and Experiences, and so I led a project called Google I/O, which is their big developer conference. But out of that, I got exposure to a lot of different departments. So Google Arts and Culture, for example, the Creative Lab, and so I was kind of always like the weird one who was doing physical installations primarily, but that had like a real digital and technology aspect. So that's LCD sound system partnered and doing a music video for them in AR, or sorry, VR, an AR app with Childish Gambino, and then doing like a large scale interactive installation at Coachella. So that's what I was doing and I loved it. And then my ear kind of I caught wind of crypto and crypto art kind of coming out of that. And I left my cushy job at Google and stepped in with kind of a receptivity into this space and just said, hey, where is this going to take me?
And
Yeah.
the connection with CryptoPunks?
Yeah, yeah. I feel like it's somewhat anticlimactic, which is when I was, independent and kind of looking for my next opportunity, had left Google. I went to NFT NYC, really with no relationships at all, except for the people that planned the events, essentially. And so a producer
Was
friend,
that like the first NFT NYC
I
where
think it was
people were losing their mind?
For me, it was the second one.
The
Yeah,
second
I
one.
think it was the second one, where, it was Bored Ape was kind of at its pinnacle at that time.
Hmm.
And so I came that summer. My partner was doing some, NFT collaborations. He's a musician. He was curious about the space and curious primarily about royalties and new models for releasing music. He'd always been independent. And so I came as his plus one essentially. And yeah, there I met some folks at Bored Ape, and they had just acquired CryptoPunks, and I hit it off with the creative director at Yuga, and then I hit it off with Noah, who was leading CryptoPunks for a couple months, and the rest is history. I just sort of walked into CryptoPunks in a way that is really quite surreal in a lot of ways. I feel like I wish that I had a cooler story for how I got the job at CryptoPunks.
Well, it's
Did
quite hard
you?
to beat. I mean, the Google early AI artworks, then early CryptoPunk. I mean, it's quite cool already.
Okay.
So with the CryptoPunks, you basically help facilitate the acquisitions and the book, and there is a bunch of other activations that were happening. Or can you tell us what exactly?
Yeah, of course. So basically for CryptoPunks, when we came in, they were an art collection in a community. And there was actually a lot of steps there to sort of cement what the future of CryptoPunks would be and decide what that would be. So when I came on, it was what will CryptoPunks be? And I think, if you look at Yuga, it's very much about community and social club, right? But
Hmm.
the team that was working there at the time was like, no, the direction for CryptoPunks is we will cement their place in the art canon. So I think even on some level, it was picking the North Star. And then from there, yes, it was projects. Published a book with Phaidon. It's an 800-page tome with pieces from Mindy Sue, Hans Ulrich Obrist, 6529. Really just a lot of different thinkers. Catalog Raisonné on a legacy project where it was getting punks into museums, placing them. A lot of it was archival work, trying to collate all of these stories and images from the far spread corners of the earth and kind of codify that and protect that and preserve that. And then it was like little things that are really stupid and silly in some ways, but writing a description and creating a website that if I was a curator at MoMA, I could click in and understand what are CryptoPunks outside of, stepping right into the art itself, which is the marketplace, for example. So that's what I did for many years and until I guess about 3.5 years now. And then it was pretty clear that CryptoPunk should be at a nonprofit. And, I had actually been proposing nonprofits or new models of stewardship that pulled them out of a financialized company, a company that had financial requirements tied to it. And when the Node acquisition came about, it felt like a really good place for them to land,
Yeah, Node actually was our first guest, and Phil announced a CryptoPunk story about 2 days after we released the podcast.
Amazing.
So that was funny. Yeah, I mean, we are obviously big fans of the whole Node Foundation and what they're curious what they're trying to do. I think potentially even making a little world trip to go and see what's happening.
You should come to the opening,
Are you going to be there?
Of course, I've been working on it.
Okay. Okay.
Maybe I'll say that. So I right now, and I left Yuga when CryptoPunks left Yuga. That was just, I've always been part of the CryptoPunks team and project. I got Larva Labs and Matt Hall and John Watkinson asked me to join them. So I work on their team. I'm kind of their rep. I'm their studio manager. I collaborate with them on projects. And then the other part of my life is I advise Node. And so that looked like for CryptoPunks originally just like landing them, here's the community, here's what they think, here's a landmine, do not do this, etc. And then now, or honestly, for many, many months now, I've been working on the exhibition. So Amanda Schmidt, who I think you guys are familiar with, is leading curation. I've been the curatorial producer. We've been working hand in hand with the Node team to plan the opening weekend, which you should come to, January 3rd, 24th, and 25th. It's pretty cool and exciting. But yeah, I mean, I'm a huge fan of Node too, and it's been cool to help develop their thesis of what they are and who they are, because in a lot of ways we're building the plane as we're flying it, And it's so interesting because Node is so new and CryptoPunks are so OG. How do those two have come together? And it's an interesting, not necessarily tension, but juxtaposition maybe.
Yeah. So 1 second about CryptoPunks. Sorry, Jean-Jacques. When you started with CryptoPunks, I mean, the OG community there quite particular. One could say quite nerdy / autistic, without being offensive. But did you stand on some landmines when you started there, or do you want to share any of those?
Yeah. I mean, I was telling Echo that I have learned in the years that I've worked on the CryptoPunks project that to be Switzerland, you know what I mean? Like there's like this level of absolute neutrality that I have learned in the process, because exactly like you said, they are a community that has strong opinions and deep roots in history. Not only was I at Yuga, who I would call their evil stepfather and mother in their eyes, that was a tenuous relationship, but I also I was new. I wasn't even a CryptoPunk when I started working on the project. And I think that in itself, I was a landmine, just by, my relationship to the project I really learned. I think in a lot of ways I had spent my career preparing for the role. Google I/O is this developer focused conference. I was working on developer art. And I would say that developers and builders, if I were to say one DNA that really unites CryptoPunks, I think they are a community of builders, so I think on some levels I intuitively understood them and I related to them. I too am a builder. I too am a nerd. Don't think I'm on the spectrum. Any isms. So I think on some level I understood them. But yeah, I stepped on many landmines, I'm sure, during my time there. I'd say obviously the most obvious one was the Artist in Residence program when we worked with Nina Chanel Abney. And essentially the concept for Artist in Residence was we would get the great artists in traditional art and digital art to do interpretations of the collection, and it would be this dialogue, and we would have artists like Cause coming in eventually to do something, and Nina is incredibly well perspected. She just showed it, I think, she's with Paritan Gallery in Paris just recently, institutionally beloved, and the reaction to it was incredibly terrible, and I felt such a deep sense of guilt, largely not only for letting down the community, letting down Yuga on some level, but letting down Nina. If there's one thing that I care about, it is artists, is protecting their right to create. And I felt like maybe she got fed to the wolves. And that was something that I could have prevented or protected in some way. And I still stand by the concept, but her work did not resonate, and it percolated. It rose to the surface that CryptoPunks is an untouchable collection, period. We weren't trying to expand the collection at all. We were trying to be in dialogue with different worlds and artists and maintain that relevancy or expand that relevancy to new audiences. But I recognize on some level CryptoPunks are kind of a sacred relic, and I'll stop there. That's my long story of landmines. I will ramble, so apologies. I'm able to go on and on and on and on and on.
It's interesting, and also, it's a very alive community as well. So I don't know what the future holds for the CryptoPunks. It's definitely an iconic series, an iconic team of builders, everyone involved in the project. It's an amazing thing, which I'm sure there are bright days ahead. And I think the book is also amazing, which must have been quite a project to work on, because it's quite a big one.
Yeah, we worked on that. I worked on that project almost a full 2.5 to 3 years, but it was such an amazing experience because it was, I got to write the book on CryptoPunks, but I also got to learn about the collection. I got to interview everyone who I wanted in the community. It was such a way to cement my knowledge, and I am grateful for that. And yeah, I don't know. There was recently, I think it came out in Art Forum, where the new director of MoMA named their top 10 anything, art, books, everything that happened, and they named the CryptoPunks book one of their top 10 of last year, and said that it kind of helped them cement their understanding of CryptoPunks as art canon. And that was just super rewarding because that was the intention. So yeah, I hope when I look back at my era, I'm still working on CryptoPunks and I'm working on this exhibition, but I think there'll be this point where, I'm not at the helm or figurehead for the project anymore. And I hope that when I step back, it will have been about that institutional legibility and recognition and cementing that in the traditional canon. And I feel like then I will have done my job. I don't know, ironically, for also being a sacred relic, you're right, it is very much alive. Look at the regular Punks project that just come out, or what we're working on for the exhibition at Node. It's being presented as a living artwork. That is how Matt and John see it, and you can see it changes. I mean, it used to be more punk and rebellious, and now the community became more, but it has this different DNA, like the OG CryptoPunks, like the OG, they want to just drink beers at the park, at NFT Lisbon, or,
Now it's become like more like a venture investment for a lot of people.
yeah. I
They
think
look at it as a venture investment. It's the thing is, the hard part about your job was you got it at the top of the market, and literally everybody's losing money because of reasons that have absolutely nothing to do with you. The whole crypto market, the whole NFT market, everything. And this emotion gets mixed in with some, you're trying to do a project with a traditional artist. It's probably not even the quality of your project. People were just angry about them losing, at least money on paper. So that must be hard.
Yeah, I think on some level, I feel like I've always been on some level, I've never really paid attention to the floor price as a metric for my success, or my goals. And that on some ways makes me, I don't know, is reflective of my limitations or my bias. Every leader, every person has their own vision, and because I'm so focused on what I believe, like I was looking at CryptoPunks for what they would be in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, and I believed that if that North Star was something that we all agreed on, that it didn't matter how we got there. I'm not saying like, oh, I was so brilliant, or oh, I'm looking so far ahead. I'm just more so saying that's just kind of where my head was at because of what I cared about and what I
Yeah.
believed was best for the project. But yeah, yeah. Sorry about the floor price, guys.
But I think it's much better to have a long-term vision because you might be bothered by the floor price, but you could miss the big picture of, let's say, stewardship with Node Foundation. So having this kind of high-level view helps you also to not like having like mood swings because the floor is moving. I mean, there's no point, there's no way you can work if you like, emotionally you are attached.
Yeah, you can't just be reacting. If you're always reacting, you're just in the waves, like you're just in a storm, and I don't think that you'll be able to steer yourself into something better. I mean, I'm sure you have that as, an artist, even as an investor. If you just always are reacting to the market, I don't think you're going to end up on top financially. So yeah, I would agree with that.
And in terms of a new project, so you just arrived back from Art Basel Miami, where you've been presenting the Quine collection. How do you feel about the 0 to 10 as a first event in Art Basel Miami?
Yeah, I mean, it was a pain in the ass to do it. It was crazy timelines and it was hard, and translating digital to physical is difficult. And I'm just totally thrilled with the result. And I think a lot of what I think is special about this movement was very much on display at 010. And that could have been the way that the galleries and the communities and the collectors and the artists support one another, like really love and support one another. In a lot of ways, we were competing technically, right? We're all trying to sell art and there's a buyer pool. And that wasn't the spirit at all. We came together and we uplifted one another. I think every single person presenting or attending. I'd say that this idea that new audiences or younger audiences or audiences in general are craving new forms of art that are reflective of their experience, their moment in time, networked culture, networked identity, social identity, that was clearly on display. And just that we're not boring. This movement is not boring. Whether this art is for you or not for you, or this artist is for you or not for you. I'm curious, I'm stimulated, it's fresh, it feels alive, you know? So that's my consensus on 010. And I needed to sleep after it. I needed naps. I was exhausted.
I really like the way you presented a long form collection on this like huge table. Never seen such a thing, but you could see straight away like the breadth of the collection. I think you really nailed the presenting format of long form in a real life presentation, which was really great.
Thank you. Yeah, we worked with Art Blocks and the newly acquired Tram team on that. And Matt and John, when they worked on the collection, they knew that they always had physicals in mind. That was actually important to them. And something that's interesting about Quine is, you just see the cover image on largely on web, on phones, etc. But I really think they come alive as like the full set and the story that a full set tells. So not only was there the aspect of showing the breadth of the collection, but also showing a full complete set and presenting that in this composed manner. So yeah, I'm really proud of it. And, I think that seeing it in all of its glory and collectors who collected a Quine being able to walk up and say, oh, there's my Quine. It felt like it was true to the spirit of Art Blocks as a platform and Larva as artists. So thank you for the compliment. I appreciate that.
It's always hard to like invent things as we go along because the problem of like showing a long form collection is quite a recent thing. So it was great to see. And in terms of new projects, what are you working on at the moment beyond what you just mentioned for the Node exhibition opening, and anything you can communicate about?
I'm in dialogue. I'm advising ThankUX. Mapan and I are always up to something. We worked on a project for almost 2 years that I'm hoping will see the light of day next year. So that's a little teaser. That one I probably would get in trouble for sharing. And then I'm working on, I guess I have a lot of secret projects that I'm working on that I can talk about maybe next year. Other than the Node exhibition, which honestly is taking more of my time right now. Larva, Matt and John and I are going to kind of sit and regroup and think about what's next. I have a music client that's a pretty major musician and artist that will be debuting an immersive exhibition in April that I hope to announce soon. And yeah, that's it. Weirdly, I'm going to try to take a small moment to, even though it doesn't sound like that, to sort of regroup and rest a little bit and try to understand, I launched a new business after my house burned in a fire, after, like Yuga, the acquisition, CryptoPunks. So I think I just need a second to like understand, myself and I guess my practice and what I can contribute to the space and to art and technology generally. So I'm figuring it out. Like I figured out what people, I don't know. I figured out, I guess more so what I'm good at and what are the holes and what do people want and need from me. So I hope it works out.
Yeah, I think it's really important because if you work in this industry, you definitely are constantly in a storm with new things getting thrown at your head all the time.
Yeah.
It took me I think I took a bit of a step back last year to understand that I actually like this. I wasn't just addicted to buying JPEGs or something like this, or or to Twitter. I actually enjoy sort of the living, moment as the CryptoPunks has, as the whole generative art, AI, networked art has. I really believe that there's something special here. Even though we have literally every single indication outside of 010 that there's nothing special here. How do you view this?
Well, okay, can I ask? So you took a step back and you kind of reset, and then you've come back okay, I still believe that this space is really special and I want to be a part of it. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
I mean, I would say that there's other indications outside of 010. Yes, we need to find more collectors. That is super true, right? Beyond this group that is currently collecting. But I would also say there's some other things that we can look to. I mean, institutional recognition is happening, to be honest, whether that's Toledo or some upcoming news that will be announced hopefully soon. There's some major museums that are paying attention to CryptoPunks, of course, is the lens that I can speak to, but other works. And I'd say that
My question is
yeah,
always, does that matter?
yeah.
The thing is, I'm in my generation, I don't care about a lot of these museums. Most of these people that bought CryptoPunks or bought NFTs didn't go to a museum, an art museum regularly. We're like, yeah, one day I hope to, have my own Picasso collection or whatever. They just landed up here because they're nerds and they like nerdy things with technology and art and maybe a little bit of aesthetics and innovation.
I mean, I love you for saying that. Like, yes, on some level, does it matter? No, it doesn't, and does it matter to this collector audience? Maybe only in the sense that museums determine what is the art canon, right? And
Hmm.
if your work that you have collected is part of the art canon, price go up. That is true, and or at
Hmm.
least stabilizes, at least
Yes.
remains something that can be more sustainable. That's like on the most practical level. I guess I personally have always thought that the art world is actually really open and curious and is actually a world where our world makes sense. I mean, I don't think Matt and John would have considered them artists. Now they do, but I mean, Echo, you're an artist, and I think you do want that, and I think you do want to communicate and express yourself, and there is some of these traditional systems that support that. And then there's people like Node, and that's like or new institutions like Node that I think are more for you, Nicholas, like that are, let's make this interactive, let's make this playful, let's make this geeky. I'm coming from tech, that's why I'm interested in this, and
Hmm.
let's bridge that gap with all of its insane a fucking amount of money that the tech world has made, generates, etc. The fact that the tech world has really never collected art is a gap that I think a collection like CryptoPunks can solve, and I think a institution in a space like Node can maybe start to play and resolve a little bit, So I don't know if that directly answers your question, but those are kind of the segments of what I look at when I don't know, thinking about a question like of does it fucking matter?
So yes.
But also, thinking about it, about your last two questions, I mean, in art history, there was always people being like rejected. If you think about, I don't know, Dadaism, Impressionism, I mean, art history for me is like a constant history of like innovation, which is put aside as a disruptor and then becoming the new stuff and adopt and embraced. And I genuinely ask this question to myself very often. I'm like, okay, but it's also interesting to use new techniques. For example, if we think about, I don't know, new paint forms, which were alone by new technical things like impression, computers, and everything. To me, it makes no sense to reuse the old tools. You cannot use old stuff to make new breakthrough innovation, I would imagine. So for me, it makes sense to use like breakthrough technology we have right now, AI, robotics, whatever we can imagine. And it's weird for me to understand that the art world of today has been struggling with us for quite a while, considering us a little bit like the misfits.
Mhm.
It's a little bit obvious that the misfits of today will become some of them in the art canon of tomorrow. Yeah, and maybe there are other like disruptive innovation in the art world today, which I don't know. But I'm looking back 20 years from now, I would say in hindsight, it was obvious, I would imagine.
Yeah, oh my God, of course. I mean, and you're right. Like, the history of art is the history of rejection, rebellion, and then assimilation, and then reinterpretation, and etc. Like that is art, right? Its own little storm. And it feels absolutely crazy to me. And that's what I would say is, I had come more from working in the music industry, and I basically, and it is the same thing, Bob Dylan going electric. I mean, that is what is happening right now. And I don't think, looking back, we're like, wow, how silly that people were upset that someone was going from a traditional guitar to an electric guitar, and it just seems limiting, and when I was at Google, there's all these myths of creativity, right? There's this myth of the artist, the singular artist in some way, and creativity belongs to only artists and, writers, etc. And it doesn't belong to coders and developers. And what I found so rewarding being at Google was actually completely realizing the brilliance of these human beings that were building the infrastructure of the world that I lived on day to day, and the extreme amount of creativity. And once I understood that, I'm like, well, why wouldn't these people over here, who are some of the most creative people that I know, use the tools of these people? Because there's so much to unlock, I mean, it's so obvious. I would agree, very obvious and undeniable. And also look at Maya Man, I mean, my Gen Z girly friends love her, and they don't know her through her generative practice or, any practice other than they are responding to the fact that, like, the way that she's in dialogue with their identity and culture as a young woman in the world. And even just the source material being interesting, being of today, of the internet age, I think is so relevant as well. Like, we shouldn't be painting, I mean, to each their own. Paint a dog with a man crossing on a horse or something, knock yourself out. But, I don't know if that necessarily reflects my experience today.
Yeah, I mean, this is my opinion. I hope to not push this onto you during some short or whatever. During the 010, I thought that the people who really embraced the fact that this is different and digital and sort of like showed it that way had way more success in an audience than the people who are trying to appease the traditional collector too hard. And it's like it's an interesting. I've been observing this because sometimes the appeasing does work. It's not just you're not just buying a screen, but at 010 it was so obvious that I mean, people obviously. I think I said to George, like, oh, this is the banana. On the first day I walked in, it's like, this is going to be the banana of of this year. And you turned around to me and it's like, yeah, that's the banana. This online, I think, because it was obviously the most insane artwork in the whole fair were those dogs. But generally, the people that still embraced digital and showed that way had way more success. I don't know what you thought about this in 0 to 10.
I very much agree. And again, every artist or gallery is making a choice that's right for their art and for their gallery, right? And I can speak to Larva Labs, which, obviously Larva Labs doesn't have issues selling their work, demanding a premium price point, like let's be real, so obviously sales isn't going to be the major issue, on our side. And it was really cool to present in a physical way, but I would say that our booth was very humble, very composed, very reserved. I don't think that our presentation necessarily, though it was appreciated and it was more about education on long form generative, on code as art, and art blocks. And in a way, Larva Labs are kind of like the godfathers of the space. And I think they wanted to present themselves in that kind of mature and formal context. That was their choice. But do I think that we had, thousands of people kneeling on a pew interact with us, or buying receipts, or getting bubble soaps? No, I don't, and I think that, and I was talking with Echo earlier, if, again, you don't want to shape your art to be a spectacle or to let the market dictate your practice. That doesn't make sense. Even in the traditional booths, like at Nada, there's a giant alligator that's been painted or that looks like a carpet, and it drew me into the booth. It's undeniable, and that's a static object. And so I think that what you're saying of digital first, I think on some level it's about interactivity, about spectacle. But then you look at a Joe Pease, and I will say that every time I walked by that piece, it just grabbed me, and it was so humble. He didn't do this on a big screen, no problem to anyone who chose a big screen, at all. Just how composed, how humble, how brave that piece was. It was one of my favorite installations in the entire, sector, I guess.
Interesting.
Yeah. I don't know. But so I'm agreeing with you, to be honest, And I'm not like naysaying anybody's choices, but I'm agreeing with you. I think that the folks that were digital first and pushing what's possible with digital and the medium were a bit more in the end, look at Jack Butcher and his installation. That couldn't have been more crypto native, more didactic about NFTs, about art, in a way challenging. And I would say that he probably went viral second to people, I would say. I think I saw him the most in the traditional art conversations or blogs or posts, etc.
Yeah. Jean-Jacques, you have anything to add?
Beyond the fact that you almost purchased the rugged alligator.
Must purchase.
I knew that you were laughing about this.
And I really like also Jack's installation and performance. I found it quite brave because talking about being vulnerable, starting the show by showing how much you are like in the negative territory and working your way up there. And that was really impressive. I really liked it.
Oh my gosh, I know this is so crazy, but to me, Jack is the great conceptual artist of our space. He's such a thoughtful thinker, and he's so intelligent, and he's so quick. And I realize that I have done him a complete disservice because you're right, Echo, that actually was incredibly vulnerable. I didn't even think about how vulnerable that is to just put that out there in that way, framing the way I see that piece.
For me, it was when I took some pictures, and when I'm going through the pictures, it was like the very first day, first choice and everything. And I had this picture of him, and behind him, there was this sign, it was like negative territory because he just started. And I was like, wow, I'm very, very glad that at the end, the sign was being extremely positive, just as a real performance. Yeah.
Well, because if it hadn't worked, gone into the positive, let's say.
Imagine you're sitting there Sunday and you're like minus 50,000.
Yeah,
no one cares.
And wearing it like a red badge of honor, or shame, like the scarlet letter, like you would just have behind you failure. I didn't succeed. Wow. I guess I hadn't even really thought about that. It's interesting.
I think it would have been successful anyways, because I would imagine that most of the booths at Art Basel were not in profitable territory. I have no idea. There was big ticket sales, but out of the 287 exhibitors, I'm curious to know. I really don't know. But just being here is a success in itself. Being here, showing the art you care about. In any case, it's a good thing.
I guess I can speak to that. I will say that I think the galleries, platforms, studios really do deserve a lot of credit for that. At best, I'd say a lot of these booths broke even. And that was a choice. Like, we're here to put our best foot forward. We're going to do this under crazy timelines. We're going to find an artist. We're going to invest in them. I think Eli did a great job curating the folks who should participate, meaning the galleries. And then it was really from there that the galleries took it and ran with it and carried a lot of the labor to show up and, put forth the presentation. I look at AOTM, that presentation from Dimitri, the costs of that seem incredible. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, just bringing the super large sculpture, which must be quite heavy as well. I don't know, but it looks very impressive. Yeah, it's so overall, and also it's maybe, I don't know if, I guess it was on purpose, but to the best of my understanding, for example, Jack was kind of self-represented. The
Yes.
same thing for Mario Klingemann, I would imagine, I'm not sure. But it's also interesting to see that the curation of Art Basel selected galleries, but also self-represented artists. In terms of diversity, it was interesting.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Sorry, go ahead, Jean-Jacques.
That's it.
Because I was gonna ask about music and NFTs. Do you want to speak about that, or should we skip this one out?
I mean, I'm down. It's interesting. Folks that know my origin story know that my partner, he's in a project called Poolside, and, successful indie artist for sure. And he was very interested in NFTs. He had never signed on to a record label by design, just felt that the system was broken. And he really looked at NFTs and blockchain, and in some ways even, which is tied to NFTs, but the social club aspect of it, that you don't have a platform that owns your community, that you can have strip away some of those barriers, was super interesting to him. I think it's been hard for him to see that some of the original value propositions, he did a collaboration also with Stems, where he did this like cool contest where people could take the original stems of his masters, and because he owned his own music, he could do this, and then he could do remixes, and there was this whole collaborative contents and community, and everything he did was super cool. 2021, 2022. And then, he kind of, like many, got a little pulled away, didn't know how to interact, and then also what he thought was so interesting about the space has sort of eroded, unfortunately, for him as an artist, like what he thought was really cool about it. And now he, has witnessed my journey around it all, and really wants to come back and do something meaningful with, whether it's music NFTs or just NFTs in general. And we're trying to figure out what that is, and I think of all of the mediums, let's say, I'd say that music and audio has sort of struggled the most to find its lane in this space, and yet there, I think, was a lot of opportunity in this space as well. So my 2 cents.
Yeah, I mean, it's for me at the beginning of NFTs. There was obviously NFTs for gaming, music, social, all of that, and conceptually they made sense. But obviously, the market, like, we were not ready for this.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing is, like, to compete with Spotify or Apple. I think there's an interesting mix that wasn't quite there yet. I don't know what.
Yeah. I mean, I agree, but the music industry is really, really struggling right now. The folks that are in the music industry on all sides, promoters, everybody, people aren't really sure on the path forward. And some of this is with the rise of AI, some of this is, to be a musician, you're supposed to be an influencer more than a musician. It's really, really tricky. And I don't have the answer, but it feels that the way that a musician has to be a slave to an algorithm, that blockchain and NFTs and this new model could potentially at least be one way to resolve that. I mean, I do, my partner will do a post about a new song that's released, and it's like 5% of his audience sees it. How do I reach the people who've been part of my career for 10 years? I mean, it's crazy. And what's the answer there? Even me, I have so many musicians that I'll love, and I'll be like, wait, that person played last night? Why didn't I know? And it just seems sad. Again, I hope that the space has an answer here, because it feels like it could. Like, it feels like the music industry in particular is ripe for disruption,
Mm-hmm.
And I think, to your point, Nicholas, earlier, where I would say that the traditional art world was also ripe for disruption. So the fact that we're going backwards, like being like, okay, now validate us, maybe isn't, in some ways is a betrayal of some of those earlier values. But
My last point to the music industry is like in art you had similar issues, but the generative algorithms mixed with the NFTs where it's like basically computers talking to other computers generating something completely new which hasn't really existed before made so much more sense to sell it as an NFT anyway. There's no other way. And I always thought that maybe in music, the generative algorithm or the other AI or whatever it was is missing for the music industry to be disrupted like this.
Yeah.
But because something entirely new is way easier to disrupt than trying to compete with the powers that be directly, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. So that's interesting because I was definitely coming at it from the perspective of disrupting the business model. And I think what you're saying is the creative potential of potentially generative for, I mean, again, AI
Or
is,
some other technology for that matter.
yeah,
It doesn't have to be
totally.
AI.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, why shouldn't they have more tools too? And honestly, I mean, look at the music industry. I mean, or music, the way that music is made. I mean, it has certainly evolved a lot, and there's a lot of new technologies, for sure. We're certainly, even though people love vinyl, we're not playing record tapes or vinyl anymore. It's not how
But
we consume music.
what genre?
I would say he's new disco. Yeah, yeah. So, yeah,
I need to look.
poolside.
I need to check it out.
You need to check it out. Yeah. You might recognize some of the music. If you're ever in a hotel or restaurant by a beach or pool, his music tends to be playing.
Oh yeah. I know. Poolside. Yeah.
Yeah,
100%. I actually, yeah. I know it's from a trip when I was in LA. Funny enough.
exactly. You were somewhere sunny and beachy, and then you're like, great, this is
Yeah.
my soundtrack for this.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing all this background, where it started, and where the future is going. We're all looking forward, I think, the opening of the Node Foundation. Also excited to see the new developments with 010 and see how things evolve over time.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Any new announcements, we're also excited to see. That was cool. What was cool to finally sit down and meet and talk.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having